What do you get when you mix a political assassination, a presidential campaign, and a man who never lets a tragedy go to waste? You get Donald Trump, turning the murder of conservative activist Charlie Kirk into his newest political weapon. Now, let's be clear. Kirk's death was shocking, horrific, and tragic. A young man with a rifle climbed onto a rooftop, fired a single shot, and silenced one of the loudest voices in conservative politics. It should have been a moment for reflection, unity, maybe even a pause in the endless shouting match that passes for American political life. But this is Trump we're talking about. Instead of reflection, we got rhetoric. Instead of unity, we got a Medal of Freedom ceremony on a campaign stage. Instead of a pause, we got an escalation. In Trump's hands, grief became gasoline. So in today's breakdown, we are unpacking 5 explosive facts about how Trump is weaponizing Kirk's murder. From premature blame to rewriting history, from fear-mongering to raw hypocrisy. This story isn't just about one death. It's about how tragedy is being converted into campaign fuel and what that means for America. When tragedy strikes, most leaders reach for healing words. Think candlelight vigils, solemn tones, and phrases like, "Now is the time for unity." It's the presidential starter pack. Empathy first, politics later. But Donald Trump? Subtlety has never been part of the Trump toolkit. When conservative firebrand Charlie Kirk was assassinated in Utah, the expectation was that Trump would mourn, condemn, and maybe even call for calm. Instead, he did what only Trump can do. He turned grief into gasoline, poured it on the fire, and struck a match while cameras rolled. Here's what went down. Within days of Kirk's murder, Trump didn't just issue condolences. He staged a spectacle. At a campaign event, he posthumously awarded Charlie Kirk the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian honor in the United States, normally reserved for historical giants like Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King Jr., or Nobel Prize winners. This medal suddenly became part of a political rally prop kit. And Trump, never one to miss a chance for showmanship, made it clear this wasn't just about honoring Kirk's legacy. It was about weaponizing his death. His words weren't the language of comfort, they were the language of combat. "We just have to beat the hell out of them," he declared, referring to the so-called radical left. Let that sink in. In a moment when many expected a unifying speech, Trump doubled down on division. Where most leaders would call for calm, he was calling for fists. Grief for him wasn't a time to pause the culture war. It was a golden opportunity to escalate it. Now, awarding Kirk the Medal of Freedom was more than symbolic. It was strategic. It transformed Kirk into a martyr for the conservative movement, canonized in the pantheon of Trump-era heroes. By doing so, Trump not only honored a friend and ally, he rewrote Kirk's death into a narrative of political warfare. In this telling, Kirk wasn't just a victim of violence. He was a fallen soldier in an ideological battle. And in Trump's world, soldiers' deaths are always rallying cries. Critics like Mehdi Hassan point out the danger in this. Tragedies are supposed to inspire reflection, not retaliation. But Trump's choice of words, "beat the hell out of them," framed Kirk's murder as proof that the left is violent, dangerous, and deserving of payback. Instead of separating the act of one alleged assassin from millions of political opponents, Trump blurred the lines intentionally. And in doing so, he handed his base a new villain, the entire left. And let's not forget the theater of it all. Trump thrives on performance politics, where every tragedy is a stage and every stage is an audition for loyalty. Handing out medals isn't just about symbolism, it's about spectacle. And in Trump's orbit, spectacle is more powerful than nuance. The Medal of Freedom ceremony was less about honoring Kirk's memory and more about producing the perfect campaign clip for social media. Trump, the Avenger, defending his fallen ally against a faceless enemy. This isn't the first time Trump has done this, of course. From Charlottesville to January 6th, his instinct has been to reframe violence in ways that benefit him politically. But the Kirk case was different because it was so personal. Kirk wasn't just a fellow conservative. He was a friend, a loyalist, and someone who had helped build the cultural infrastructure of Trump's movement. By elevating Kirk posthumously, Trump elevated himself, reminding supporters that even in tragedy, he alone is the one who can fight back against the enemy. So why does this matter? Because grief is supposed to humanize leaders. It's supposed to be the rare moment where politics takes a back seat. But Trump doesn't do back seats. He grabs the wheel, leans on the horn, and floors it. And when the fuel is tragedy, the destination is never unity. It's always more division. And if you thought turning Kirk's death into a campaign medal was audacious, wait till you see what came next. Because Trump didn't just weaponize grief. He turned it into a blame game. And guess who was in his crosshairs before the suspect was even caught? Yep, the left. There's an old saying in journalism, get it first, but first get it right. In politics, however, the motto seems to be, get it loud, and who cares if it's right? That's exactly what happened in the immediate aftermath of Charlie Kirk's assassination. Before investigators finished collecting evidence, before police had even confirmed a suspect's motive, Trump and his allies had already assigned blame. And the accused wasn't Tyler Robinson, the man in custody. No, the accused was the entire American left. Think about that. The FBI was still piecing together Robinson's Discord chats, neighbors were still processing the shock, and former classmates were still saying things like, he seemed so normal. Meanwhile, on Capitol Hill and across conservative media, the narrative was locked in. This was the work of radical left lunatics. Facts? Pending. Evidence? To be determined. But scapegoating? Immediate. Republican lawmakers went to the House floor almost instantly, delivering fiery speeches branding Democrats and progressives as pure evil. It was less a debate and more a sermon. Kirk's death as Exhibit A in the case against the left. Trump himself, never one to shy away from dramatic flourishes, declared that the left was out of control and must be stopped. The body wasn't even buried, and already the murder was a weapon in the next campaign speech. Now, let's pause here. Normally, when high-profile violence occurs, the standard political playbook goes like this. Condemn the violence, express sympathy for the victim, and avoid speculation until facts are confirmed. Why? Because facts matter, and premature accusations can inflame tensions. But Trump world doesn't play by that book. They skip straight to the conclusion, and the conclusion is always that the left is to blame. This move is clever in its cynicism. By framing the murder as a product of left-wing ideology, conservatives instantly shift the narrative from what drove Robinson to do this to what is wrong with the entire left. It's guilt by association on a national scale, and it works as political shorthand. If your base already believes the left is dangerous, then Kirk's death becomes the smoking gun that proves the theory, regardless of what investigators ultimately conclude. Mehdi Hasan in his analysis called this exactly what it is, an evidence-free blame game. He reminded viewers that in the U.S., political violence has complex roots, and it's reckless and dangerous to pin responsibility on millions of people for the actions of one man before the investigation is done. But recklessness is the point. This isn't about accuracy, it's about impact. And in the age of viral sound bites, impact beats accuracy every time. There's also a deeper psychology here. By rushing to blame, conservatives created an emotional shortcut. People were angry, grieving, afraid. In that heightened state, the demand for a villain outweighs the patience for nuance. Trump gave his base what they wanted, a clear enemy. And once that enemy was named, every other detail, the gun, the Discord chats, the engraved bullet casings, became supporting evidence in the courtroom of partisan opinion. The problem? That courtroom isn't real. It's a circus tent. And while the show plays well to the base, it undermines the justice system, poisons public discourse, and hardens divides. Instead of asking how radicalization takes root, we end up arguing over which political tribe is the real monster, That's not analysis. That's distraction. So, fact number 2 is simple. Trump and his allies didn't wait for evidence. They didn't want evidence. They wanted a villain. And by pinning Kirk's murder on the left before the facts were in, they turned a tragedy into a partisan cudgel. Facts be damned. But if you thought the premature blame game was bad, buckle up, because blaming the left wasn't just about pointing fingers in the present, it was also about rewriting history. And when it comes to rewriting history, Trump and his allies practically have a PhD. History, they say, is written by the victors. But in American politics, it's often rewritten by the loudest voices in the room. And when it comes to Charlie Kirk's assassination, Trump and his allies wasted no time in revising the narrative. Not just about the single act of violence, but about political violence in general. Welcome to Fact 3, the Great Rewrite. Here's the trick. Conservatives aren't just saying, this was the left's fault. They're also retrofitting that blame into a bigger story, one where every act of violence magically belongs to the other side, while their own past sins vanish into thin air. It's political selective memory, or as Mehdi Hasan calls it, amnesia with an agenda. Take January 6th, an insurrection at the U.S. Capitol, live-streamed for the world to see. Rioters waving Trump flags, chanting "Hang Mike Pence," smashing windows, and storming the floor of Congress. For most people, that looked like the dictionary definition of right-wing political violence. But for Trump and his defenders, nah. They've since rebranded it as a peaceful protest, an overblown misunderstanding, or, in some of the more creative rewrites, a secret plot by Antifa. Poof, rewritten. Now fast forward to the Kirk shooting. Before we had a clear motive, Trump world didn't hesitate to declare, this is proof the left is violent. Notice the double standard? When it's violence by Trump supporters, it's downplayed, rebranded, or erased. But when Kirk is assassinated, it's not just one individual's crime, it's the smoking gun for an entire ideology. That's not analysis, that's narrative construction. The Great Rewrite works in 2 steps. Step 1, minimize or deny your own violence. Step 2, magnify your opponent's violence, even when the evidence isn't in. It's like a magician's sleight of hand. You don't look where the trick is happening because you're too distracted by the spectacle. And the spectacle is powerful. Trump's speech awarding Kirk the Medal of Freedom wasn't just about honoring a fallen ally. It was about writing Kirk into the conservative mythology as a martyr killed by the enemy. It's historical framing in real time. Years from now, if this narrative sticks, the assassination won't just be remembered as a tragic crime. It'll be remembered as proof, in the conservative imagination, that the left is inherently violent. Facts, optional. Mehdi Hasan nailed this point. The rewriting isn't accidental, it's deliberate. It's how movements turn tragedies into propaganda, how they transform grief into fuel. It's how you take one man's horrific act and use it to smear millions of political opponents. And once the rewrite takes hold, it's incredibly difficult to undo. There's also a feedback loop here. Once Trump paints the left as violent, it justifies his own calls for aggression. Remember his words, "We have to beat the hell out of them." That line sounds less outrageous once you've been convinced the other side is out for blood. The rewrite doesn't just distort history, it authorizes future violence. This is the danger. By rewriting the narrative, Trump isn't merely manipulating memory. He's setting the stage for what comes next. Because when you frame politics as war, fear becomes your favorite campaign tool. If you've watched Donald Trump for more than 5 minutes, you know he loves a good villain. Whether it's immigrants, fake news, or the deep state, his campaigns thrive on enemies. And with Charlie Kirk's murder, he's found his scariest villain yet. The American left, painted not as political opponents, but as violent extremists lurking around every corner. Welcome to Fact 4, Fear as a Political Strategy. Here's the blueprint. Step 1, take a tragic event. Step 2, assign blame to your opponents before the evidence is in. Step 3, exaggerate that blame until it becomes an existential threat. Step 4, present yourself as the only leader tough enough to stop it. It's politics as WWE storyline, with Trump playing both the victim's avenger and the crowd's champion. Listen to his language after Kirk's assassination. He didn't just mourn. He didn't just honor. He told his supporters, quote, "We just have to beat the hell out of them." That's not policy talk. That's bar fight talk. And it's effective because fear is rocket fuel in politics. When people are afraid, they don't want nuance. They want protection. They want a strong man to promise them safety. And Trump is more than happy to play that role. By framing the left as a violent force, he makes every rally, every speech, every campaign ad feel less like politics and more like survival. Voting for him isn't just supporting a candidate, it's defending your community against chaos. That's the message. And it's powerful. Of course, the irony is that political violence in America is not a left-only phenomenon. Far from it. Studies and law enforcement data show that right-wing extremism has been responsible for the majority of domestic terror incidents in recent years. But fear doesn't need statistics. It just needs stories. And Trump knows that a single high-profile event, like Kirk's murder, can outweigh years of inconvenient data. This is where Mehdi Hasan's critique cuts deep. He argues that Trump is using fear not to heal or protect, but to harden divisions. By weaponizing Kirk's death, Trump isn't lowering the temperature of an already overheated country. He's cranking the dial to 11. Because in his calculation, fear doesn't divide his base, it unites them. And fear works especially well when people already feel uncertain. Think about it. America in 2025 is polarized, angry, and exhausted. The economy feels shaky, social media amplifies outrage every second of the day, trust in institutions is scraping the floor. Drop a political assassination into that mix, and you've got the perfect recipe for panic. Trump didn't create that environment, but he knows exactly how to exploit it. The risk here is obvious. When leaders govern through fear, they don't just rally their supporters, they also radicalize them. If you've been told again and again that the left is violent and that your family's safety is on the line, how long before you decide violence is justified in return? This is the dangerous feedback loop Mehdi Hasan warns about. Fear fuels division, division fuels more violence, and more violence fuels more fear. It's a vicious cycle, and Trump is steering it like a NASCAR driver. So fact number 4 is clear. Trump is using fear as a political strategy, turning Kirk's murder into proof of a larger existential threat. For his supporters, that fear is galvanizing. For the country, it's destabilizing. And for democracy, it's toxic. But here's the kicker. While Trump frames the left as the sole source of violence, the reality is very different. Because when you dig into the numbers, the cases, and the history, the bigger threat hasn't been from progressives at all. And that brings us to the most uncomfortable fact of all. Here's the part where the curtain gets pulled back. Trump's whole narrative about the left being violent, it collapses under the weight of basic math. Welcome to fact 5, the hypocrisy problem. Because if you actually look at the numbers, the cases, and the history of political violence in America, the story isn't what Trump says it is. In fact, it's almost the opposite. Start with the data. According to studies from the FBI, DHS, and multiple independent watchdog groups, the overwhelming majority of political violence in the U.S. over the past decade has come from the right, not the left. We're talking bomb plots against state officials, synagogue shootings, militia movements, January 6th, the list goes on. Yet in Trump's narrative, none of that counts. January 6th wasn't an insurrection, it was a peaceful protest. White nationalist violence? Brushed off as the work of lone wolves. Right-wing extremism? Either ignored or downplayed. Meanwhile, When one individual assassinates Charlie Kirk, suddenly it's not a lone wolf, it's not an isolated crime. Suddenly it's Exhibit A that the entire left is bloodthirsty. That's hypocrisy in its purest form. One side's violence is minimized, the other side's violence is maximized. It's a double standard big enough to drive a campaign bus through. Mehdi Hasan has been blunt about this. Trump is exploiting tragedy while erasing context. He paints a picture where conservative violence is always misunderstood or overblown, while liberal violence is always part of a vast ideological conspiracy. The problem is that this isn't just a lie, it's a dangerous lie. Because by refusing to acknowledge where the majority of the threat actually comes from, Trump isn't just misleading his supporters, he's leaving the country more vulnerable. Think about it like this. Imagine a doctor who ignores the actual illness and insists the patient has something else entirely. The real problem festers while the wrong cure is applied. That's what happens when political leaders misdiagnose violence. By blaming the left for everything, Trump obscures the reality that right-wing extremism remains the primary driver of domestic terror in America. And when you can't even admit the problem, you definitely can't fix it. But hypocrisy isn't just about ignoring the data. It's about the rhetoric, too. Trump's speeches often drip with violent imagery. From telling crowds to knock the crap out of protesters back in 2016 to declaring we need to beat the hell out of them in 2025, his words aren't exactly a hymn to peace. Yet somehow he positions himself as the guardian against violence. That's like an arsonist demanding credit for installing smoke alarms. The hypocrisy extends to his allies as well. The same lawmakers who minimized January 6th as a tourist visit are now shouting that Charlie Kirk's assassination proves the left is out of control. The same media figures who roll their eyes at statistics on white supremacist violence are suddenly weeping on air about America's descent into chaos. It's a selective outrage machine, perfectly tuned to protect one tribe and demonize the other. And here's the kicker. Hypocrisy isn't just a bad look. It's corrosive. It eats away at public trust. When people see leaders rewriting reality in real time, it makes cynicism the default setting. And when cynicism rules, democracy loses because people stop believing in the possibility of truth at all. That vacuum gets filled with fear, division, and yes, more violence. So fact number 5 is this. Trump's weaponization of Kirk's death is built on a foundation of hypocrisy. He ignores the violence from his own camp, exaggerates violence from his opponents, and presents himself as the savior in a story where he's often part of the problem. It's not just inconsistent, it's dangerous, because hypocrisy doesn't just distort the past, it distorts the future. And that's the final piece of the puzzle. From grief turned into gasoline, to premature blame, to rewriting history, to weaponizing fear, and finally, the hypocrisy holding it all together, Trump's response to Charlie Kirk's murder is more than politics. It's a playbook. The question now is whether America will keep letting him run it. So there you have it. 5 hard-hitting facts about how Trump turned Charlie Kirk's death into a political prop. From staging a Medal of Freedom spectacle to declaring war on the left before evidence even surfaced, from rewriting the history of violence to stoking fear for political gain. And finally, the hypocrisy that underpins it all. This isn't just about one leader or one movement, it's about the future of political discourse in America. If tragedy keeps being used as ammunition, then we're not just debating ideas anymore. We're living inside a permanent state of political combat. And when fear and hypocrisy become campaign strategies, the risk isn't just polarization, it's escalation. Now, here's the question I want to throw to you. Is Trump's response to Kirk's murder just smart political instinct, or is it a dangerous precedent that could push America into even darker territory? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear how you see it. And if this breakdown gave you more insight than the shouting matches on cable news,
Hit like, subscribe to @GlobalPulseNews, and share this video, because the more we understand the playbook, the better chance we have of changing the game.